I started when I was, actually when I was 5. Everybody says I started when I was 9. But when I started realizing that I could do leatherwork, it was at about 9 years old. But I was punching holes in belts at 5. As a kid, I did elephant harness for Ringling Brothers. I was 13 years old, and Dad pawned me out in the summertime. He said, take this kid and teach you something. And I was stitching elephant harness, the training harnesses, and leather about 1.5 inches thick. And they didn't have awls or machines that would stitch them, so you had to do it by hand. And Dad said he knows how to stitch. But then that was like stitching with rope, you know, it was pulling all that thing apart. And this was training harnesses. They hooked an old one up with a new one, and then jerk him around. The old one would jerk the new one around, teach him teach him the ropes. And I had more fun there than I had. Dad would realize. He said, "Don't let him sleep in the air-conditioned cars. Leave under the car." And I never had to do that. But life, it's been a hard life. I've enjoyed every bit of it. I hoboed from Florida to Pendleton, Oregon, to study with Hemley Saddlery, and they didn't want me around. They said, "You need to go home. You need to get an education." And I didn't want an education. I want to do that, carve leather. And so an old man by the name of Rattan was a magnificent carver. But every time I get close to him, he turned his leatherwork over. I couldn't really get close enough to see it. So I, at times, would take my binoculars and look at it through the lenses to see what he was doing. And so one evening I thought, well, I'll take the tool out of his rack and put it on case leather, which is wet leather, and get an impression and put it right back in place. And I did 350 of those things. And I hit it. And the next morning I come in, he said, "I hate a liar and a thief. I'm supposed to catch you at both." And I said, "I didn't steal anything." He said, "See, you're lying already." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "This." He pulled out a piece of leather that I hid on the top of his desk, and he said, "You stole the impressions off every one of those stamps." So he cut a knife up and cut them up in little pieces and took the trash. And he said, "You better hell hit the road." So I left and I went to Porter's in Phoenix, and they run me off of there. And I came on back to Dad's shop, and Dad says, "Why don't you do something else besides saddle work? The horse and buggy day's over with. Forget it." So I went down the road to one of his competitors, and I studied with Ray Sullivan in Tampa, Florida, for, I guess, in the 60s. '65, I opened up my own shop in a feed store, and they were crooks. They didn't handle people right. So I had enough of that. So I got a job at the University Center, University of South Florida, and opened up their craft facility at the Student Union. It's still in operation. And they asked me if I was a sandal maker. And this is during the hippie days. And I said, "Not no, but no." And we made 4,000 pairs of sandals. So I guess I'm a sandal maker. Boy Scouts said, well, Tandy said, "Why don't you go with me down to Camp Noche in Florida, around Ocala, and I'll get you introduced down there, and maybe I'll pay your way and teach a class down there. Stay with them a week." and teach there, and then come home and I'll pay you $100. I said, that's okay. And then when they found out that I was pretty good, my best demonstration is I drove 150 miles from Tampa to Ocala and left my tools at home. I had the stamping tools. I left my mallet and my swivel knife at home. So I went to the maintenance shop and I said, have you got a big spike nail? And they said, yeah. I said, let's make a blade out of that and sharpen both sides. It kind of an angle. And they said, talk me through it. I said, well, I will. And then I said, you got a way to polish this thing up? I got jeweler's rouge, and we'll put it on a buffer and run that thing hot and get it sharp. And I played with it a little bit. I got that. And then my mallet, I left at home. So I had rawhide down there, and I wrapped it around a pretty good sized stick and made it a mallet. Put it in the oven to hurry up and dry it, and then varnish it and speed dry it. And that night, I said, we're going to have a meeting at the lodge, and all these scouts come on in and bring you sleeping bags. We're going to spend the night. And those of you that don't have the merit badge, the leatherwork merit badge, and those that do will learn leatherwork where they didn't before. And so we had everything. And that was the best demonstration I've ever done. And I carve with a nail the same as you would with a swivel knife. And it works. So it's not to the tool, it's the person behind the tool that makes it work. And the man up above is the one that's in charge. The person just getting started, we'll try to find out if there's another club near them. Get involved. And there's people in all the guilds that'll share. That's one way. Go to a good leather store that sells things like Tandy or other craft companies. And Hobby Lobby. There's the people that have classes there all the time. And they can get and watch and get involved. Go to a saddle shop. Sometimes they'll share, sometimes they won't. If they know somebody that does leather work, talk to them. They're pretty friendly, occasionally. Just practice what you know. Keep doing it over and over again, and you'll keep improving. Look at what you did yesterday and compare it to what you do today. That's the only thing I can say. It's easy if you compare your work to somebody else's work or a photograph of somebody else's work. And study how they put things together. Maybe maybe they're no good at carving, but they're good at assembly, creating patterns of like folding boxes, stitching, sharpening tools. Sometimes a dull tool will keep a man from doing leather work. It won't work. I've got one. So hopefully tonight I'll get the right blade. But that's all I can say is that compare your work to what others have done or something similar. And a place like this, look around. If these things don't inspire you, there's something wrong. I mean, you really don't want to do it. But sometimes these things can be intimidating. They put you in a frame of mind where you may not want to do it. Because I can never do it. It's always the negative. Think the positive. And the negatives will disappear. I think probably the oldest one that I know of would be Bob Brown, Big Bear, California. He's called the Moses of leather, Leonardo da Vinci. He was a man that wanted to teach it. His skill was he worked as an illustrator with Norman Rockwell with Brown and Bigelow Company. He was a sheriff. He was worked for the police departments all over. But leather was his cup of tea. He made the holsters for Roy Rogers, Gene Autry. He loaned John Wayne the money to build his first pair of boots. He did all the leather for him under the Boland name, the Boland Company. Hopalong Cassidy. And I was at his home 19 days and I never saw it all. And I thought, this man is just blowing wind. And then row after row of drawers he would pull out and he'd show the patterns and some of the holsters that these movie stars would send him back as a gift. And cold chills. He made a swivel knife. Well, it's a predecessor to the swivel knife, out of a screwdriver. Instead of pulling it like we do, he pushed it like an engraver. And wow, this stuff was awesome. Then there was people like, I'm talking about, they know of him, but years ago, but not recent. That would be Al Shelton. He was an engraver. He designed this saddle ring. His type of carving was different than anybody else and beautiful. He was another one that would turn people on. And one time he did it, made, I want to say Leather Secrets. And I worked with the old-timer F.O. Baird with Simcoe West. I was their designer with Simcoe for 2 years, and they fired me because I was carving for another company. And it wasn't in their contract, but it wasn't, they didn't, nothing in my contract said I couldn't. But anyway, I left there. And then when later on, they said they'd hire me back. They were sorry that they got rid of me. I designed stuff for Little Britches Rodeo, Pikes Peak or Bust Rodeo, all their trophy saddles. I designed them. And they were all handmade, hand carved. And there was 12 each year that I do for those two outfits. But then there's a whole lot of carvers out there that are not famous. They could be, and most of them are right here in this room. They're so-called beginners. And they're not a beginner, really. We all have a talent. We've all been issued a piece of pie. It's like, I don't have a high school diploma. I do through a GED. I quit school in the 8th grade. School didn't interest me, but leather did. And Dad thought I was stupid. But we have that piece of pie, and the part that we like, we made a big chunk. And the part we hate is a little bitty chunk. I didn't like sports. I was not a runner. But when we moved to Alaska, a bear got after me. At that point, I was an Olympic runner. I was a sprinter. I could get with it and up a tree. But I didn't know a bear could climb, but they do. And thank God he fell. Or I could have been a stain on some blueberry bush. But there's a whole lot of leather work that goes on, even with the natives, the Eskimo and the Aleut. I worked with them and lived with them, and my military job was teaching arts and crafts. I was in a tank outfit, and it didn't work. I went past by a craft shop, didn't know what it was. I always carried my knife with me, and I saw this guy carving some leather. And I said, "What are they doing?" And he said, "This is a craft shop, and we sell leather, half-cent a square inch." I said, "Well, I'll take 100 inches." So they cut me a piece of leather, and he said, "Do you know how to carve?" I said, "A little bit." I said, "How do you do this?" He said, "You take this template and you rub it off." And I said, "How do you wax your leather?" He said, "With a sponge." And I said, "Have you got a sink handy?" And I took that piece of leather and I threw it under the sink and wet it both sides. I let it there for a little bit and shot the floor with them. Then I started carving just freehand. And the man that I slapped on the shoulder and said what a good job he was doing, he said, "Private Gomer," he said, "you know what who you just slapped on the shoulder?" I said, "I don't have a clue." He says, "He's Major General." I said, "No, poop." He said, "You're right, no poop." But he left me when I was carving, and he walked over there and tapped this general on the shoulder and said, "You need to watch this kid. He's good. He's real good. He makes me look sick." And the general looked over my shoulder and he says, "What unit are you in?" I said, "I'm in a tank outfit, 172nd. He said, "You want a job doing this?" I said, "You mean there's an MOS for this?" And he said, "Yeah, there sure is. It's 03 Delta." And from then on, I got the job. I put in my transfer, and my company commander said, "You're not leaving this outfit." And he said, "You are. You're coming." He said, "Put it back again." He said, "Tell him I'm going to make a phone call." Answer the phone in about 3 minutes. So I ran over there, went through my chain of command, and he said, "It's you again." I said, "Yep, I want to transfer." And he said, "What it up?" And the phone rang. It was General Moore. He said, "Do you have a Private Gomer standing there?" He said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Sign that transfer, please." And he forwarded it, signed it, and I had the job the rest of the time. And all my career was teaching arts and crafts there and in the military prison. But there's some artists in there, true artists, that don't know how to carve leather, need to be taught. And we don't rehabilitate anybody. That comes from the individual. But we can provide an atmosphere for it to happen. And that's what I did. And I requested a second tour. Now you're getting back to the subject of who's who and who's that. Ken and Roberta Griffin were two famous ones. He wrote the first leather carving book. Roberta used to write an article, Leather Skivings by Bert. And then they said, "Your name is Roberta." She says, "No, I want to be called Bert." She's a redhead, funny. And then they were doing magic acts. And they asked me if I'd go on tour with them. I said, "I can't." He said, "Yes, you can." He said, "They've given us the rank of former colonels, my wife and I. And we're going to Vietnam." Well, I never made it to Vietnam. But I did go on the naval carriers and taught the wounded GIs. he said, I've heard about you, and now I got a chance to see you. So I went with Bob Hope, Jane Mansfield, and that group, and all over Alaska. I don't know who my mentor would be, but like the man that kicked me out of his shop in Oregon, when he died, his wife called, Mrs. Rattan called, said her husband passed away, and I was in his will. He said, I want Bill. I said, I thought the world of Bill Gomer, and I want him to have these tools. And if he don't want them, he don't want no other son of a bitch to have them. And in 1968, I said, yes, ma'am, I'll take those tools. 1968, those tools were stolen. Never recovered them. Never got a chance to use them. They were all handmade. I still weep over that. But it's that point that taught me to start teaching this. Share what you know and forget the rest. And it'll all come back to you. Every time you share with somebody, it comes back to you 10 times. If you don't, it comes back to you 20 times. So that's what I've got.